Welcome back to day 3. Can you believe it? Day 3 of our topical training. Again, I'm Kendy Cox, and I'm going to get us started for a brief few minutes this morning before we delve into our content. So we're on the home stretch. Thank you guys for hanging in there. You've been wonderful participants so far. So we're looking forward to another great day together. So before we get started, here's what I know so far. I know Dr. Hong has really knocked it out of the park with these research-based concepts and frameworks that you guys are so excited about, and figuring out little by little how to incorporate that into the work that you're doing. So love Dr. Hong. We also know that you guys have been so incredibly engaged with the practical strategies that your peers, the other grantee panelists have shared, and that's been a truly insightful opportunity to hear some best practices and tweak them for your individual needs. And then we also know that these field talk sessions have provided you with the opportunity to take, the theoretical to the practical and really hone those ideas and start thinking about what you're going to do when you get back home and incorporate all of these ideas, and certainly engaging with your peers and talking with the experts about your small or big ideas has been an opportunity in those field talk sessions. So that said, we know we're on the right track with those different strategies. So guess what? You get more of those strategies today, just focused on some different kinds of content. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to start it off with Dr. Hong again with our keynote on building psychological and social capital in youth. One of the things that I connected to in the description of the session, for those of you who participated in the last topical training, this concept of hope and self-efficacy and resilience was so powerful. And so I think taking what you've already learned and then applying it in a little bit different way with Dr. Hong's information will be incredible today. So I look forward to that. And then we'll have another grantee panel on effective ways to operationalize, this time topics E and F. So that will be a time to focus on that very specific piece of the puzzle. And then we'll end the day again with a field talk session, again, taking A through F topics all together and putting those into action. So those are our marching orders for today over the next few hours. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jerry Regier, who's going to kind of set us up for Dr. Hong's session as we get started with our last day. Jerry?
Thank you, Kendy. And thank you for that summary and introduction. And hello to everyone that has rejoined and is rejoining from what we have seen in the chat, etc. This has been very insightful and helpful, and we're looking forward to day 3 this afternoon. And this session will discuss how building the psychological and social capital of youth can increase a sense of hope, self-efficacy, resilience, and the goal-oriented optimism that they need to thrive. And as Kendy mentioned, we will emphasize topics E and F today. And those are the topics that particularly talk about many of the risks that youth face today. Dr. Hong, we have really enjoyed having you, and many people are in the chat communicating how they've enjoyed your sharing of your research and sharing of your insights. Dr. Hong is at the Loyola University Chicago, And I don't think he would mind me telling you that as of this coming June, he will actually be the Dean of Social Work at the University of Georgia. So those of you that are in the Southeast, he's coming your direction. So Dr. Hong, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for how you've been able to bring your research into the world of SRAE. And we appreciate it very much. And I will turn it over to you, Dr. Hong.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome and the introduction again, and welcoming me back into this room filled with so many experts and passionate leaders. I have learned so much from all of you in the last 2 days, and then more to be learned this afternoon with you. And thank you again for your feedback and things that I need to be working on to continue to learn more about, things that are innovative and amazing work that you're undertaking in the community. Really, really appreciated. So just quickly as we get started, I know we left on a note of looking at barriers to hope yesterday when talking about TIP. And again, it's a toolkit that we can use to strengthen the SRAE work that we're currently doing with all the main work that we're committed to. The TIP is has exercises that you can incorporate, but those are not the additional work that you'll have to be doing. It's just more the toolkit in using the framework of psychological self-sufficiency. So I just wanted to reiterate that, and these and you're welcome to see how this might fit in various contexts. As we do that, as we think about this tipping or psychological self-sufficiency from barriers to hope, as you see here, how are you tipping today? Would you like to kind of quickly answer in the chat box for us? If you have a minute, maybe share with us, how are you tipping your barriers to hope? Maybe you might not have anything to say, that's okay, but are you tipping well your barriers to hope? Do you know what your barriers are? Have you thought about it? Do you not want to think about it? That's fine too. But if you can just quickly think about quickly that red card. What's my barrier? And do I have the two hope actions for one barrier? How are you tipping? I'm tipping okay today. And today, as we're going to be moving into, thank you. Some of you are answering the questions. Tipping great today. All right. I'm tipping okay. Great. This is just the mindset of moving forward with 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and being in this context of that us community as we are doing this. We're not connected by the 2 steps forward. Often we might think that we have a lot of greatness and we have a lot of ways that we reach our fullest potential. At the same time, there's this commonality that unites us as human beings, the human race, which is that shared vulnerability we're going to get to, that barrier that we have talked about. So not necessarily the barrier as a negative thing. We talked about hurdles yesterday, obstacles, challenges, many ways that we can conceptualize it and take it in as we might be less resistant to that term, barrier, right? So however we want to say it, that is what, from that, we're moving forward with gratitude and 2 steps forward, full speed ahead. Right, great. Thank you so much for your great answers. And of course, some of you didn't answer, but that's okay. I know you're thinking about it with us together. We're in this community of learning atmosphere as one group today. And I wanted to kind of bring us to this concept of psychological capital. There we have psychological capital, social capital that we'll be discussing today. There are many things like resilience, grit, and many things that we kind of look to being that fuel for our youth to thrive. And how do we tap into that? And one of the things I like to highlight is soft skills. That there's high evidence uh, that with cognitive test scores being related to cognitive skills, but also high motivation and adequate personality traits. So these are things, motivation and personality traits might seem like psychological attributes, but it's more that it's not visible. It's not by brain functioning. It's something that is sort of that takes you further than how you're telling yourself to do. It's not by design of command and action, but it's just something that is coming out of you with some type of meaning, some type of roots in your passion. That's where that's what you're tapping into to get to that next step. And so there's also consensus that non-cognitive skills, these uh, have important effects both on school attainment and labor market outcomes. Less consensus exists on the malleability of non-cognitive skills. Some argue that these skills can be altered until the end of teenage years, and others claim that emotional intelligence can be changed at any age. One story that I was able to read this week was about a person who was not doing so well in school in his teenage years and received an SAT score in his junior year of 1,450. And his mom asked him, did you cheat? Is this really your score? I can't believe you actually got this score. What happened? And so he went back and checked, and he found out that it was his score. And so he didn't even believe it because he didn't study for it. He didn't do anything to get that score. So people just thought that he was brilliant. He was just an amazingly brilliant person who didn't have to study to get that score. So he graduated with that score, went on to go to college, and ended up being the most successful entrepreneur. Um, many years down the line, there a letter came to him saying that he was one of 10 people whose SAT scores were swapped or mistakenly had another person's name score was assigned to him. His actual score was 1100, and so he didn't know, but he believed out of that experience how he might be very intelligent and how he was so he could unleash or unlock a lot of things that maybe he didn't know about himself. Suddenly, all came out with the belief, possibly that he might be really smart. So this thing is this story came helped me understand that it's the belief in the possibility of one reaching for the fullest potential. That belief catapults. I mean, it just puts a lot of us into that motion, into the future oriented motion to get to that the place where we never had dreamed about. It could be possible. So again, it's not to say that he was, his scores were this or that, but it's that belief that he had no environment around suggesting that he was smart, but suddenly that mistakenly sent score that he got suddenly allowed him to think that maybe it's possible that I could be smart. Maybe I can work harder to get to that next level. So that really, unleashed, opened the doors for amazing opportunities for him. So he goes around and talks about how we have, these greatness inside of us, and let's unlock those and let those all come out of us as they should, and that we all deserve to be in that, to share our greatness with this world. So the non-cognitive soft skills that we typically talk about, can be seen as personality trait if people don't see that as much malleable. Maybe it's the, kind of terms that we use as, that are known as agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, autonomy, extroversion. Often we hear the word grit these days, resilience, hope. Character, emotional intelligence, agency, self-efficacy, possible self, mental contrasting, being able to contrast the benefit of an action versus the risk of those actions, growth mindset. These are terms that are often used to be called psychological capital. And also some of the cognitive psychological capital might be executive functioning skills and life skills, self-regulation, impulse control, emotional control, flexible thinking, working memory, self-monitoring, planning and prioritizing, task initiation, organization. It's not easy to say that you ought to do X, Y, and Z and do impulse control. But what allows us to have those ability to control or minimize the effects of some of the behaviors or the actions that we take, and being able to look at the consequences outside of our immediate actions. So those are kind of the abilities that we talk about in our youth, and they often are called psychological capital, cognitive and non-cognitive. And I'd like to bring us to this sort of a series of a quick snapshot of findings from our research. The ESS stands for Economic Self-Sufficiency, PEBS, Perceived Employment Barrier Scale, and EHS, Employment Hope. This is hope, this is barrier, this is the outcome of economic self-sufficiency, and the PSS theory suggests that barriers to hope to economic self-sufficiency is significant, with these stars showing on those pathways. Now, put together with EHS and PEBS is the PSS, psychological self-sufficiency, has bearing on resilience, executive functioning, and grit. They significantly affect those. And we've also found that PSS contributes to resilience, executive functioning, and grit to lead to economic self-sufficiency. In a nutshell, that's what we're talking about. But also, how is this PSS process connected to social support as a social capital, and spirituality, and self-efficacy and self-esteem as our psychological capital? They all have connections in ways that these are the psychological and social capital concepts contribute to the PSS process in a significant way. So what do we mean? Again, as we talk about PSS, psychological self-sufficiency, let's do some reviews from day one. The PSS is the ability to transform seemingly impossible barriers into possible. It is conceptualized as a dynamic interface of non-cognitive and cognitive forces that help you remain resilient on your path to reach your goals. It embraces empowerment and a strength-based approach to building character and capacity to sustain skills training, education, relationships, and future goals. This research, I should say, using the focus group studies with job seekers, define self-sufficiency as we had talked about. How do you define self-sufficiency from your perspective? It turned out that it's a process of developing psychological strength and making goal-oriented progression toward realistic outcomes. It also uses a mental contrasting concept of barriers and hope, obstacles and hope, that allows us to generate energy toward goals by association of reality and future. So it's really self-paced, self-managed process that we own. It's really what self-sufficiency or psychological self-sufficiency is about. Now, so this talking about executive skills, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities has strongly emphasized the importance of executive and self-regulation skills to impact employment stability for vulnerable, disconnected workers. This is in the context of workforce development, but we can also take from it that self-regulation has to do with the ability to control one's behavior, emotion, and thoughts, and executive functioning, the ability to manage oneself and one's resources in order to achieve a goal. This is, again, part of the psychological capital that we're discussing today as a background. One of the things that we've learned from our research also as we see here, is the PSS that we talked about in our theory on day one, has these psychological and social capital elements that are in TIP contributing to PSS: self-efficacy, self-esteem, forgiveness, self-compassion, goal orientation, gratitude, social support. These are variables or concepts that we use in our research that we found to contribute strongly to PSS. And one of the things that we take to the next level in our work is from PSS, as we look at the concept of praxis, we're going to get to that in a short while, that allows us to build trust through humility, and that by which humility you're gonna find resilience, executive functioning, and grit improving as a result. So these are all connected. That's the point we're trying to make here. PSS might be a little tool, a bridge that allows us to take something that might seem impossible, to take it to the possible, but surrounding it are these scaffolding concepts of psychological and social capital, and then also taking it a little bit deeper in a relational context, and also our as we focus on SRA goals, this humility and being able to meet yourself for who you are, but also with others as they are, as we are. So that's the really key piece that we're going to be talking about today. As I had mentioned, that we'll return to this concept of trust and praxis. Praxis is a combination of reflection and action. According to Paulo Freire, praxis is reflection and action upon the world in order to transform it. Yesterday we talked about the difference between change and transformation. And in order to transform it, we are doing this reflection and committing to action. Reflection on the barriers of the difficulties, but also we're committing to the hope actions, as we had talked about the barriers and hope. And that's where we say in the top part here is the human action. And then the word that one speaks. If they're consistent with one another, as you have the action and the word consistent, then we can say that we can trust that person because the words and the actions are consistent, and thereby we can create this word trust by keeping those two pieces of our actions consistent. So that's what praxis is really about, and bringing that into our work is kind of this way of connecting praxis as it's about the reflection and action to transform our world, and using that principle to bringing it to metacognition, which is something that we're going to be talking about shortly, to bring to trust by connecting humility, empathy, and shared vulnerability. I would ask you to look at this side, the circle, where humility, empathy, and shared vulnerability has kind of a cyclical effect of reinforcing one another to create the culture of trust. On the left-hand side, you have all these topics that are introduced in TIP that really invigorates this praxis process and reaching that source of strength. Where do you get your strength from to be able to tip the barriers to hope? And that in the middle is the metacognition that we're going to be talking about shortly. So humility, what is humility? It is the quality or state of not thinking you're better than other people. As we had talked about, us is that we're creating this common ground, the connectedness, that I am not talking down at you because I think I know better than you, is the opposite of humility. It is the quality of state of being humble. It is recognition of self in relation to the universe, acceptance of one's defects, and submission to a greater power. And then if you look at the left-hand side, that you would see a little yin and yang kind of a picture in the background with the definition of humility on the left-hand side, which reads, humility is the first step towards greatness. In admitting that we do not know everything, we open ourselves to learning. In admitting that we can fail, we open another pathway to success. In admitting that we are flawed, we open ourselves to accepting others. So it just creates this relational capital through humility that we can connect the tissues of psychological and social capital. It's a really key piece that will help us to bring the pieces of empathy and shared vulnerability with humility to reach that trust in that which is foundational to do great work that we are doing in the community with our youth. I wanted to bring your attention to this design thinking diagram that you've seen sprinkled around in the last 2 days. Some of the slides have shown this empathy, starting out our innovative process of designing any program or even approaching our relationship or care for our youth. But one thing that was missing in there that doesn't really get talked about a lot is this block of humility, which I want to give credit to my colleague Tom Merrill, who was at Xavier University in Cincinnati. And it's really about that humility, allowing this empathy to be strengthened through learning, which begins when we adopt the learning mindset, adopt a humble mindset, and develop a bias for action, where it's about accepting the fact that humility must be part of each iteration. This humility is just not where you start, but every iteration of your thinking, designing, implementing, and so forth will be part. You will bring back to the source of humility, and then develop comfort with uncertainty, because a lot of times we face uncertainties and then anxiety kicks in. But with humility, we know that we're flawed or we may not be perfect, comes that comfort and peace, allowing us to continue to be support, to provide support for our youth. Admit the need to enter a project with humility to allow yourself to feel shame and confusion. Often we kind of stay away from the shame and confusion, and with uncertainties that come that maybe these shame and confusion are rooted in. But humility allows us to face the threat of those conditions and be able to admit that I'm going to go in with my care for how I could provide support in the process of providing implementing programs with our youth that we're serving. Empathy. So we looked at humility, but how does empathy get invigorated or strengthened through humility? That is really the question. It's about understanding our youth's feelings. We also see the world together commonly, and we appreciate youth as human beings, and we are able to communicate our understandings through empathy. Empathy is the experience of understanding another person's condition from their perspective, or we could say our perspective, as we concentrate or focus on that us, as we talked about in the last couple of days. You place yourself in their shoes or in another person's shoes and feel what they're feeling. Empathy is known to increase pro-social helping behaviors. So it's something that we already have. We exercise empathy in many contexts, and we want to be consistent in tapping into that empathy through humility. The next slide is about shared vulnerability. And it's about this cycle of going from sharing vulnerability to build safety through that, and where the story can be told genuinely and authentically. It's not to impress other people. The youth have the permission to be who they are and accepted for who they are as we share our vulnerabilities. Even as adult, I can be vulnerable with them, although we could have some professional boundaries. There could be ways that I could be just like you in ways that I've gone through my challenges and overcome them. And one can use that as an example or a mirror to say, I will do like him or better than him. And so that vulnerability connects us in that relationship as we move forward together. And that allows the building of safety to emerge. To quote Brené Brown's statements on vulnerability, vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. When you shut down vulnerability, you shut down opportunity. We don't have to do all of it alone. We were never meant to. We cannot selectively numb emotions. When we numb the painful emotions, we also numb the positive emotions. So it's really this vulnerability is kind of saying it's a contract almost to kind of remind ourselves that we are human beings because of all the things that we share in the imperfection, not the perfection, but the imperfection, the things that we struggle with are just common to all human beings. It's normalizing that barriers is not a negative thing. It's not a shameful thing. It's something that we all face. So therefore, we bring you back to this metacognition as kind of the connecting tissue between praxis and trust. And I want to kind of reiterate that as we look at this, what this metacognition process allows us to be better in tapping deeper into the possibilities of our youth. And metacognition is the thinking about one's own thinking. It's self-awareness, which is the foundation. It has three processes involved in learning. It embodies those three processes: self-understanding and mental processing, understanding our unique profiles of barriers or challenges, and hope and strengths. And it's kind of like a mirror to watch ourselves. And so that's about just being cognizant of our own thinking. It's also about reflection, thinking about what we know, and we can trust ourselves about what we know. And it's just that awareness of giving ourselves that permission and also giving ourselves that strength to say, I may be right. And self-regulation, it's regulating and monitoring the learning process and selecting learning strategies. And it's recognizing and accepting the imperfection and self-correcting in future steps. So it's really that trusting myself that I can self-correct along the way, not being stuck on the, in my anxiety, what ifs and what ifs and what ifs. But it's really trusting myself that I can launch myself, take the leap of faith and saying that I can be imperfect. I may not be perfect, but I can launch myself with the 2 steps forward with hope actions to say that if I'm not correct, that I can self-correct and amend and revise along the way of my path toward my future. So that's the connecting bridge between praxis and trust with this metacognitive awareness that we want to think about for ourselves, but also allow our the modeling of our with humility, what we do, allowing modeling by youth of what we do by being humble and bringing ourselves true and authentically to our youth. And it borrowing from our psychological self-sufficiency framework, reflection really allows that metacognitive awareness to kick in, where you could start with the feeling of reacting to a barrier or obstacle or some situations that are challenging. But we can think by accepting that barrier as such. We could give it a name. We can call it a name, or we can say, this is a barrier. Sometimes we refuse to do that. We push those away as not calling it anything. It's a negative thing. I don't want to even think about it. I'm going to park it deep inside somewhere and not come back to it. Instead, if we think about it and accept it as such, that is challenging, that is something that is blocking my pathway to reach my goals, that allows us, our feelings, to go from switch to thinking, which then allows us to take those hope actions by being more cognitive about it, with plans and goals about those hope actions. But once you do that with 2 steps forward, you have this sense of reward or gratification that comes with those 2 hope actions, that you feel like you're empowered, and there's some energy that gets sparks in that process, where those actions taken through goal-directed actions that provides this calming effect, overcoming effect, and allowing me to better overcome future barriers. So it's kind of circles around through my reflections and action steps, giving it the self-awareness necessary as foundation, that bridge between praxis and trust. So I want to bring us back to our focus in the 3 days of our conference here, on looking at the topics A through F in SRAE. And today's topic relates directly to E and F, as we will have more discussions about it after this session. But just to make the connections to those E and F topics, first, E has to do with how other youth risk behaviors, such as drug and alcohol usage, increase the risk for teen sex. And the topics or the keywords that I pulled out from here are youth risk behaviors, and that's related to drugs, and youth risk behaviors that are related to alcohol. And just commonly, in general, looking at the psychological and social capital topics, how do we understand the topics E and address it using this background material that we're covering today? From risk avoidance to daily tipping practice by utilizing tips, psychological and social capital, we could sort of address this is not just avoiding risk, but also making it so that risk behaviors are there, but we can take the 2 steps forward through tipping to the next steps of overcoming them. And so it's no longer fix and modifying, but the belief that I can get to those next steps, allowing our youth to overcome or avoid naturally, is really what I was able to reflect upon as how this work connects to the topic E. And also humanship and transformation, as we talked about yesterday. It's not about change. It's about allowing youth to take full control, and allowing our youth to reach their full potential through their greatness that they find and they uncover inside. Altering rewards pathway is one other way. It's no longer getting that calming effect through these drugs and alcohol, but the ways that you're switching that rewards pathway by reaching your goals, small step goals to the long-term goals, by championing some of these, overcoming these barriers, obstacles, hurdles, and you suddenly feel very good about those steps that you've taken, and the reward of that can overpower the reward of some other substance that you have been relying on to feel more calm, for ways to overcome your fears, anxiety, or whatnot in the past. So topic F is about how to resist and avoid and receive help regarding sexual coercion and dating violence, recognizing that even with consent teen sex remains a youth risk behavior. So the keywords I pulled out are sexual coercion and dating violence. And some of the things to take away from psychological and social capital material that we're introducing to you is the anticipated risk, the barrier, and then the plan of action through hope can be self-prescribed using the if-then statement. I think that could be very powerful as we look at some conditions that might be negative or that could be high risk. We can always program ourselves or prescribe to ourselves through the barrier that might be approaching us. We have an easy path of having committed to the two hope actions get to go to without processing too much of thinking, because we've already promised ourselves to do that. Those two hope actions can help overcome and avoid and be able to talk about and report some of these things that we encounter. And also resetting goal commitment by revisiting the purpose and meaning of being an active participant in SRA. So how am I in the pathway? I don't know if you remember the steps that we took for each step of TIP that would allow you to go climb up to reach your goal in SRA that we talked about yesterday. But resetting the goal commitment, revisiting that, and understanding that this pathway is not about just doing it for the sake of doing it, but there's a deeper meaning and purpose attached to each step that I'm taking. And that's really that those two things would help us tackle the issue, approach the issue of sexual coercion and dating violence in topic F, which we'll be returning to later on this afternoon. And we often have to remind ourselves that this outcome is what we are striving to achieve. And at the same time, we need to honor the success process that our youth will bring to their commitment, their everyday, their trust in authenticity, and truly being part of the process as agents of change and transformation is really critical. And how can they take these two steps forward and one step back movement toward that outcome is really important. But also the unpacking of, so this process leading to the next process that is honoring each step is really important in reaching the outcome. Now, unpacking the depth of the barriers, often they're seen as behavioral, maybe seen as things that are attitudinal, things that and maybe appearing as though people don't know how to do something more cognitively, but deeply in the non-cognitive aspect of our work are these things that that really hinder movement forward in our process, that are often seen in our community. There's violence and inequality, poverty, oppression, racism, and other things that really, and trauma, particularly, that is encompassing of all the lived experiences of our youth. And many who serve the youth are facing various difficulties that we call sometimes barriers, but these are all connected. So going deeper and allowing the healing to happen on a natural course as one moves forward towards the goal is the accompaniment that we allow our role to have of the youth. We're accompanying their process. We're walking the walk with them through the process to reach the outcome of success. So that's really important as we look to serving our youth. And also the question that I like to pose to everyone in this room today: can SRA be a tip goal for our youth? Thinking about the true intrinsic and purposeful goal that one can say, this is a goal, this is what I want to be when I grow up type goal, that we can kind of ask ourselves to really think about in the beginning, but allowing those true intrinsic and purposeful tip goal number one, how that can turn to targeted, intentional, and practical goals that are more like SMART goals, eventually emerging out of the greatness, out of the fullest, out of the strengths of each youth to reach their fullest potential. So it's not enforcing a SMART goal from the beginning, but allowing youth to define what is true, intrinsic, and purposeful in their lives, that they can define targeted, intentional, practical goals that they can achieve. And it's about anchoring on the existential meaning of goals. Participants start the transformative journey to overcome their barriers within and challenge the external barriers by way of building and sustaining hope for their future. So again, I wanted to, introduce you to the combination of the two Chinese characters of danger and opportunity, which both form the word crisis. So in any crisis situation, there is this other half of opportunity we often ignore. It's kind of like what John F. Kennedy said: the Chinese use two brush strokes to write the word crisis. One brush stroke stands for danger, the other for opportunity. In a crisis, be aware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity, allowing our youth to not just be stuck on the barriers or this danger part of crisis, but there is this opportunity that we can sort of open up to and allow those and emerge into those opportunities to say that I am not going to be stuck in this danger or barriers or hurdles or obstacles, but I am walking right into those opportunities and allowing my 2 steps forward to get me to that, and let those come to me rather than I always having to force myself to grasp those opportunities that always disappear in front of me. They are always there. I'm going to walk right into it as I deserve to be in that situation. So the final reflections I would like for us to kind of come to is to thinking about this barrier or hurdles or obstacles often define us as broken and often leading to no goal pursuit. And look at this vessel here with maybe broken pieces and seeing being stuck in that red box of barrier often can lead to this type of brokenness. Using the if-then statement in TIP as a toolkit, where you write down the barriers like what you did yesterday, and there will be we're going to share the handout from yesterday now. But if I run into a barrier that you can fill in that makes me believe it's impossible to achieve what I want, then I will take the following hope actions, the 2 hope actions, to make it possible to achieve what I want. So it's telling myself, conditioning myself, training myself to believe that for every one barrier, there are 2 hope actions that that's going to be naturally fitting for me to move into those opportunities that we saw earlier in the crisis situation or any difficult situations. It's the contract with myself. I can put my name down and date. And you see in the chat box, you'll see the student handout on looking at this if-then statement. Now, but I'm bringing this yin and yang back, that this barrier and hope are just the kind of the ways, things that are part of our lives, rather than this red being this negative thing that I have to put away, lock away, and never have anything to do with. But they can actually fuel the emergence of opportunities and hope, where I can walk into it as those that are there for me. And I have already seen it in my life, fulfilling my destiny to be there. Not despite the fact only because of the barriers, not of the barriers, but now it's just kind of holistically one in the way that we are trying to reach our goal. And look at this, how beautiful this the golden sort of the mending that you do to the plate or this vessel. Now making it very beautiful as a design, almost as if people try to do it on purpose, but it's actually the scars that have been left by the vessels that create the beauty. And we are not, even if we try to make it like that, it probably wouldn't be as artistic as that. that we could actually draw on a vessel when it's plain. Let's just look at these and just appreciate the art of these vessels. So these vessels are called the kintsugi. Is a Japanese expression for the art of precious scars. Broken pieces of humble clay are made stronger by mending the shards together with pure gold paint. The breakage isn't hidden away, but rather highlighted and made part of the vessel's future. The result is something more resilient and beautiful. So as we can be seen as someone who had been through many challenges, and we might have been called, or we might have called ourselves, or our youth calling themselves broken, disrespected, vulnerable, at risk. But the beauty comes to life when you appreciate those and can turn those into the most beautiful artistic form of how we can appreciate these scars as part of our beauty. And we can say, because of those, it's kind of like the quote here, you are more beautiful because you have been broken. I like to kind of share that. And it's I'd like to read a quote with that. It's my turn to the next. As we look at this art here, the body art, I'm strong because I'm weak. I'm beautiful because I know my flaws. I'm a lover because I'm a fighter. I'm fearless because I have been afraid. I'm wise because I have been foolish. I can laugh because I have known sadness by unknown. Our narrative changes from an if-then statement to one that we can now say, because I have run into these barriers or obstacle or hurdles that make me believe it's impossible to achieve what I want, I will take the following hope actions, the 2 hope actions that you identified, to make it possible. It's the condition now connected not by if then, but now this barrier is fueling me to get to my next steps of taking 2 hope actions. The next slide is the final one with the references. As you can see here, some of them have really informed my work preparing for this presentation, and it's bringing us to the final question and answer stage here of our work together today. So thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Hong. And that art at the end was particularly beautiful and moving when you think about it, not only in terms of the vessel, but in terms of human beings and in terms of youth that we work with. If you would just put your questions in the chat that you would like to ask Dr. Hong, we'll pick those up and pass those on. I hope you're watching the chat, Dr. Hong, as they're giving you a standing ovation. So let me begin a questioning. As we think about this whole process, can you give any insight as to what might be the most effective catalyst to helping this process begin for young people? Any thoughts on that?
Thank you again for your kindness, everyone. I'm now coming back to the chats. I wasn't looking at it before, so I'm just now looking at it. So I really appreciate everyone. And also I appreciate the question about the catalyst for young people. From my experience, as we have been trying to take some of this concept, from research, and thinking that we knew something finally, and went to the young people and was definitely made humble. We were humbled by the youth in ways that we were approaching it. The resistance was that you adults don't know what we're going through, and as much as our intention was not that, suddenly, when we thought that we had some answers to support the youth, that some answer, that position, where I would call that positionality, uh, was evident in the postures, in the way that communication was made, unintentionally made it where it was slightly talking down at the youth, which didn't quite do well for them. So I would say that humility would be really critical. However, we can get to that, whether by being called out, still being humble to use that as an opportunity to be more humble or more open, where we can earn the trust of the youth, as that we are not, we're co-runners. We're going to be running side by side, as you're going to be doing your race and I'm doing my race. If I can build that camaraderie as me being a coach, but also a co-runner, that's the permission that I can earn, the trust that I can earn from the players or the youth, who can say, I trust you as my coach, I trust you as my mentor. Until then, I don't think we can really do much. So I know a lot of us are already doing great work like that as mentors and supporters, and maybe you're already coaches in Little League and doing other great sports activities with our youth. So kudos, to salute to everybody who do that so well. And I could only say we just have to keep learning from the wisdom that's so rich in this room today.
If you could scroll back, thank you. If you could scroll back up to one of the pictures, or maybe where you talked about Kitsugi, people are requesting that you show that again, or maybe even just put it on the next slide, and so that they can see that. Here's a question, and then maybe after showing that for a while, then people would like to see, maybe after this question, then you could show the reference page again so they could take a picture of it. How do you start to not only focus on the barriers or challenges that youth might bring, but also challenges and barriers at home? Is there an effective way to also focus on parents being able to participate to remove their barriers that could cause the youth to create more barriers from the parents? In other words, that interaction with the family. Thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you for the question. And I just had that discussion with a group of youth workers in Michigan, who were asking that same question of how to engage our parents to be allies in this work, so that that we can build, if we're doing truly inside out, bottom up work through youth, really uncovering their own strengths and being able to unleash that into their future for their excellence, their greatness, that they can come out to reach their fullest potential. How can that be communicated? How can that be scaffolded? How can that be modeled in the lives of in the family of kind of dynamic? The youth will bring their leadership as they will grow to be their well-deserved excellent state through various unleashing of their excellence. At the same time, parents will continue to have their own barriers and struggles. And how do we help them is a big question, to reflect, and also to not try to teach down at the youth who are coming to be their own independent young adults very soon. And so that paralleling the process with youth, as parents are no perfect beings, although they don't want to show their weaknesses to their children. So how do we help them to do that shared vulnerability while keeping their sort of a hierarchy as being being parents? They still have control over the finances and all the things that happen in the home. At the same time, being that human being, the humble human being, as one is still on the journey and maybe not have conquered all their obstacles, can actually do much better with the youth and building that trust and giving the permission to come and share their own things that they're going through. So I think that those are communication and other kinds of ways that we are all doing with our parents and engagement. Those can be, I guess we can highlight those in ways to, kind of strengthen parenting skills, but doing it in parallel with what the youth are experiencing in their own opening to their opportunities. So I would welcome those learning more about it from all the great wisdom that we have in this room as well. Thank you for the question.
Somebody follows that up and says, Adam says, that was my question as well. How do we get more parents to participate in these same principles to help their children grow? One of the thoughts I have on that, Dr. Hong and Adam and others, and that is that I know that many times you have the opportunity to use supplementary materials, although you're bound, of course, by your curricula. But, there may be snippets of videos, whether it's Dr. Hong or other people, that bring some of those principles in a 3 or 4 minute snippet that you somehow send home with kids. And just indicating, parents, here's some things we are sharing with your children, and that might be a way to increase their interest. And some of you I know have contact with parents through parents' nights and different other kinds of ways. Tina asks, Dr. Hong, are you looking to continue your research with this model? If so, are you open to suggestions?
A short answer is yes. I'd love to continue and learn. Research for me is a learning opportunity and sharing that knowledge with our community partners so we can grow together to serve our community. That's the only reason why I say that I would do research. I don't have an exact plan for how I could continue that, how I would. It won't look the same when I move into my new role in Georgia. But I will always be around to support many partners in doing great work that they are already doing, but in other ways, with support of possibly looking at PSS, psychological self-sufficiency, in the context of relationship building or optimal health, or other ways that we can customize to look at those data, to evaluate those together. So I in spirit, that's what I hope to do. I don't know what opportunities exist out there yet for us to possibly connect in the future, but please keep me in mind for any ways that I could support with any resources and anything like that. I'll always be around. And just going back to the previous question, if it's as something as simple as holding this ball. I mean, like I have a ball in front of me here, right? So holding this ball and with the parent and child, just kind of asking, throwing the ball to the next person, or the child holding it, and the child does not get interrupted while just saying, "How are you tipping?" Well, I got this, and then I'm tipping. Don't want to go into details because I don't trust you yet, because that's typically what happens in this communication. The youth can, the parent can hold it, and then this is this is how I'm tipping my barriers to hope. When it gets to the point where the trust can be built, that when they can really share that barrier or obstacle or hurdles, that's when people can be sort of in that, you can kind of know that there is that trust built, the bridge has been connected. So that communication without interruption can help kind of build trust and camaraderie between parent and child. I'm actually trying that with my teenager right now, and giving her that microphone permission to be herself and not be interrupted, and be as wild as she needs to be, but knowing that she'll be fully supported while she's speaking. And so that's kind of what I'm trying out. But anyway.
Dr. Hong, if you would move the slides, why don't you move to the end so they can see how to contact you? And while you do that, I want to read some follow-up from the chat. Alice writes that they email short monthly tips to parents or text short tips to parents. Cassie writes, we provide parent engagement activities and coffee and conversations with specific topics each month. We also post parenting tips, post on what our students are doing in the program on our Facebook page. But it's very difficult to get parents to attend. Yes, if we ask them to attend something, that's much more difficult. And so I appreciate some of the ideas of getting things to the parents rather than asking them to come to you. Let's see if we have any other questions. Annie says she looks for opportunities to build relationships with parents, families, guardians by celebrating their teens, phone calls or text to share something a teen has done really well, family meetings to show parents what their teens are accomplishing. I found that since so often parents are only pulled in when something is not going well, it's refreshing to them to receive affirmation and positive feedback. Any other questions that you want to put in the chat? And while you do that, I will ask one of Dr. Hong. You talked about humility, and obviously teaching humility and modeling it is probably the best thing for young people. It seems that humility, I'd like your thoughts on, it seems humility is somewhat closely aligned with teachability. And young people many times want to be seen as knowing all the answers rather than seeking. And any thoughts on how that can be modeled to help youth be more teachable?
Yeah, my experience in being in the room with the youth, as I originally, I was told not to use certain terms, to not have judgments on them, not avoid trying to have biases that are typical of the type of youth that we are. So there's a lot of pushback in the beginning. One of the things that as icebreaker we did was to give them the opportunity to teach me with my current situation as I'm trying to figure out as an adult, trying to figure out my relationship with my daughter, or how to communicate, how I was such a flaw in being able to engage my daughter in a conversation and lost the opportunity when she slammed the door and went in and never came out for many hours. So I asked advice, for the youth, and so how do I tip my barrier? That was my barrier, but now how do I overcome that? I don't have any hope actions that could help me overcome. I'm actually stuck with not having these two hope actions that I really need to have it. So allowing them to bring so much wealth of what could happen from the perspective of the youth, kind of put my vulnerability out there. And they really had a lot of fun trying to teach me and give me a lot of tips, and then allowed us to then have this, sort of the openness where I said, thank you, this is wonderful. Now, what are some other things that other people want to tackle in your kind of position of looking at your obstacles or hurdles? How do we, what can we do to help some of those hope actions to emerge from your greatness that you have inside? So those are opportunities to build. But it really came from me sharing my vulnerability and trying to be that, I guess, modeling humility in front of our youth. So I think that could be a good way to build those bridges.
Thank you, Dr. Hong. If you'll move the slide to the reference page, and then we are going to ask people to maybe do their clapping, if you know how to do that on Zoom. And we're all giving you the high fives. Dr. Hong, we appreciate very much these sessions. And we thank you for taking the time from your teaching and research schedule. And so I'm going to turn it over. Adrian, I guess there's no instructions. We're going to take a break and come back at 20 past the hour. And so if you'll come back into Zoom at 20 past the hour, we'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.